Hey everyone, Jay here for Just Technics. We've got a pair of 1210 Mark IIs here at the moment, which belong to my friend Paul over at Studio 808. These require a lot of love. A lot of love is probably the only way really of putting this. They are meant to have been serviced. I'm going to put that loosely, serviced over 4 or 5 years ago. A bit of background on these turntables. I've actually used these myself because I used to play on 808 for Paul back about 4 or 5 years ago. And they are horrific to mix on. I don't think there's many DJs that have used these turntables while playing their residencies on 808 that have not struggled. I mean, they are horrific. I'm going to show you now what I mean with the pitch. So if I turn the first turntable on, we've got a very, not too dim, but it's not at the correct output. On the strobe for a start, when we hit the start and stop, you can see at the 0 position, it is slightly moving. It's still going a little bit too fast. We've then got on the pitch control, the 0 position LED is not functioning at all. There is a ball bearing and spring there with no physical lock actually engaging. And also the range of the slider is completely wrong as well. So if I tell you now on here, if I show you on here, so if we get it to 3.3 and I'll then show you the actual markings. So 3.3, 4.5, nearly 5. Then we do +6 that you can barely see on the camera. So we got 7.5 minus 3.3 is probably gonna be around 2.5. This is what I think it is. Yeah, well, look at that. 2.5 to 3 is bang on 2.5. Right, okay, so the first slider, if that's still moving at the 0 position, either we've got a dirty connection on the board itself, the carbon track is either covered in God knows what underneath, and that's stopping the lock from engaging, or we've got an M3D slider in here. Now, the wiring harness connectors are not cut on a certain wire to bypass the lock, so I can tell you now that it's not because of that. Until I desolder the actual board, there's no real way of telling what slider we've got in here, but my money's on an M3D slider. And there is a reason why I say this. If you look at the other turntable, we'll turn this one on. I mean, again, dim LEDs. I mean, you literally, if I move the lamp out the way I'm showing you here, you can't really see it. But you'll see now at the 0 position, which hasn't got a ball bearing and spring, at the 0 position, we've again got no LED. But we've now got movement at the 0 position as well. So again, the wiring harness hasn't been broken. The connector cable underneath hasn't been desoldered from the PCB. There's no bypass or any of that rubbish on here to turn this into a Mark V M3D style board. So my money is on this being an M3D board. And I'm pretty, well, I'll say pretty confident until I desolder the board apart to do this. I'm pretty confident this also is an M3D board, because what is the chances of having two of these reacting exactly the same way, but you've got the ball bearing and spring on this one and not on this one here? So it's almost as if he's just desoldered the board on one, taken the ball bearing and spring out on one, and not done it on the other, or he's used the an M3D original board on a Mark II aftermarket slider unit housing and just bent the pins back, taken it off, popped a new one on. That's what it seems like to me. But either way, not good enough. Really not good enough. The lamps, when I used to use these decks, I'm pretty sure still worked. Now, they are the original lamps on here. Well, they were the original lamps, I should say. They can go at any time. These are old turntables. I mean, you're going to get people moving them around, throwing them around if they're making rooms for CDJs in radio stations or putting their own equipment down. So I'm not surprised, but that's 4 years ago. So when I last used these, 4 or 5 years ago, they're going to go. But that's still not good enough. I would have installed LEDs at minimum, SMDs, something that's superior in comparison to what the originals would have been. Even just to match the original output with like warm whites, for an example. Pitch trims are terrible on these. I mean, I replaced these as part of a service. I mean, there's no reason to keep these on unless you really want to keep the original feel. The slider units do feel like they've been replaced, the actual housings themselves, because they do feel smooth. Both of them do. These wouldn't have been re-oiled. I very highly doubt that, or re-greased, or... No, I mean, they do feel like just an old pair of worn aftermarket units, but just haven't been looked after by DJs that have used them, or you just don't know, do you? The arm assemblies on these are another big reason as to why they've come into me for a service. I mean, there's looseness in the arm. You've got the lock at the back of this one here, moves extremely easy, as you can see. There is movement that you can hear. That's the bass moving. And if I go to the other one, this one's just as bad, look. So, and the actual lock itself on this one's firmer. So either this hasn't been touched or is used less of a viscosity oil on one section than the other. So we've got one that moves firm, one that moves freely. And the same thing actually goes for the bass units themselves with the height adjuster rings. One of them is quite tough to move. The other one, not so tough to move. And obviously the broken tone arm clip is going to be replaced as well. So we've got to make sure the bearings are okay on these. If they're not, then we're going to have to start thinking about arm assemblies, because you can, like I explained before, you can remill housings and pop new bearings in with like RC bearings, but it's a hit and miss as to whether you're going to get them absolutely perfect. And considering that these are going to be used for, you know, streaming live radio station play, these need to be perfect. They really do, because he has all sorts of people play on this studio. There's been some really big names. I'm actually quite jealous, to be honest, at some of the people that have played, because I've not been up there when they played. Some big names in techno. But yeah, so we're literally going to be stripping these down, rebuilding them from scratch. I mean, the platters on these are extremely bad. I mean, they are dirty. We've got chipped paint, flaky paint. They need a bloody good polish, which I'm obviously going to do. That's the first thing I'm going to do. We'll try and use a burring solution on the black sections, try to black out some of the missing paint, because the only real thing you can do with these is strip the paint off, polish them up to an inch of their life, spray them, sand them, and then obviously seal them. So you can obviously reuse them and touch them without the paint falling off, like with a lacquer over the top to stop any paint from flaking. That's the only real way of doing this. Unfortunately, it's not something I offer because, it's, again, time and the fact that if I start using a compressor again like I used to use years ago to refurbish platters, you've got to have a sealed area. It's risk of this going everywhere, and I just, unfortunately, do not have the time to do this. And I've got more than enough space, but it's the time, guys. More important getting these things working correctly. Platters can be found online. I mean, you can always strip the paint down, you can flat black them, you can do whatever you want with them. But my main priority is getting these working. We are changing the look of these though. That being said, so the wraps, both of these plimps are going to be stripped down. Everything's going to be flattened. We're going to be going for black, brushed black metallic 3M vinyl. It's going to look lovely. It's going to cover any imperfections as well. We're going to smooth off any imperfections. It's going to be lovely. We're going for blue LEDs all over, brand new pitch trims, brand new shader gloss, brand new pitch slider units. Obviously replace these damaged lamps with blue SMDs that I custom make myself. The audio cables are my originals. If we've still got good continuity on these, which I highly doubt we're going to have any problems, but I may very well just change these over for one of my new pairs. I've got slightly thicker cables without braiding, but they are a better capacitance, obviously, with the cable itself. So I think for what he's going to be using these for, we may very well change the cables. We'll see what happens when I go through my testing. But my initial test with these cables, when I used to use them years ago, when I used to rebuild these, they were absolutely spot on. So we've got new audio cables. Grounding cables are going to be replaced. The reason my cables are actually on here is many moons back, I replaced the cables as a mobile job for Paul, like I say. So audio cables and a PCB pre-soldered together. I rode up on my motorbike. We changed over the cables for him there. But he said the grounding cables were fine. Got there, and obviously then they're not really fine. These are the ones that were put on by the previous tech. They are not the best. So I'm going to be changing over the grounding cables at a minimum. But the audio cables should be fine because they're mine. Yeah, so I thought I'd just show you the before video. These, and also the slip mats. I made these slip mats for Paul originally, and you can see what they're meant to be like. This is the one problem with using white slip mats and DJs who do not clean their records regularly. You can see it here. I mean, that looks more like smoke and dirt, to be honest. But either way, they're going to be changed over. We've got a couple of different style Technics mats that are going to be going on that I'm going to be printing for him. We're going to make a final decision on what's going to be happening there at some point. Yeah, so there's your before video, everybody. Keep your eyes on the page. I've got 2 weeks to get these done for Paul because they're going to be used, like I say, his radio. He's been trying to book in for ages with me, and time's obviously caught up with his bookings with his music production and what they do at 808. They're very, very busy over there. So getting the physical time to run these down from the studio and be without turntables. This is the other thing. A lot of DJs that actually play on 808 do use vinyl. But if you've got DJs every week playing vinyl, they can't really be without these. So unfortunately, they had to use them because the pivots were quite loose. Or I say quite loose because they're really loose. If you've got damaged pivots, a lot of people tend to undo and churn and ruin the pivot points. And it tends to lift the pin up in between the bearings, and it can get you out of the hump and get you out of jail. So you can still use the turntables, but any physical heavy cueing, they're going to jump. So that's why he's only just managed to get these down, because they did still work. I mean, if they function, then great, but the pitch is way out on them. I'm sure you could pull a mix off, and I mean, I like I say, I struggled massively. Paul does exactly the same with these. We can't get on with them, but if everybody else is okay, then that's just, everybody's different. But I think there's a lot of DJs that were moaning about the pitch. A lot of DJs, I was one of them. So yeah, so this is the before, and keep your eyes on the page. It's going to be another video, but check out Studio 808, guys. They offer music production. They've got a DJ room as well. They live stream. Absolutely fantastic. So check them out when you get a few minutes spare. And yeah, keep your eyes on the page. Any questions you've got, put your comments below. I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. Obviously very busy at the moment. But yeah, thanks for watching, and keep your eyes peeled for the next video. Cheers, guys.